To the situation in Syria now, airstrikes against rebel-held areas of Aleppo have intensified, forcing 20,000 people to flee in the last few days.
A top United Nations envoy has pleaded with the Security Council to help break the siege of the city before, in his words, it becomes one giant graveyard. A warning, this report from our diplomatic editor Dominic Waghorn does contain images of people killed and injured in Aleppo yesterday.
Street by street, pro-regime forces are continuing their offensive into Aleppo, clashing with rebels, while civilians risk their lives crossing lines into government hands. Children welcome the arrival of the army as its troops fan out through what was rebel-held territory. We can't verify when or where these pictures were taken, but they've clearly been released to present regime forces as liberators. Behind rebel lines, volunteer rescuers called White Helmets released this footage, the aftermath of a devastating attack on civilians fleeing fighting in eastern Aleppo. Bodies and body parts strewn across the street. At least 20 reported dead in almost exactly the same place as another strike yesterday that killed around the same number. Fleeing the carnage, a human exodus is underway. There's mounting international concern about those who have been able to escape. Observers say many civilians are being rounded up and detained.
The humanitarian situation is worsening. In the opposition areas, the siege continues, and refugees are continuing to flee towards Kurdish-controlled areas. The numbers are significant, and there is a need for action on the part of the UN to help those present inside the besieged city of Aleppo.
As many as 250,000 people remain in rebel-held Aleppo, caught in a ghetto now under intense bombardment.
The vast majority of the people of eastern Aleppo are still trapped in a sharply worsening siege, pounded by accelerating bombardment, and deliberately deprived of food and medical care. Many of them, including small children, report that they are simply waiting for death, a nightmare which clearly violates the most basic norms of human rights and any shred of human decency.
Here in Parliament, the Prime Minister was challenged on Britain's response to the crisis in Aleppo.
We have consistently looked at what might be the possible solutions to see if there are other avenues that we can press for. I think the Security Council debate is very important, and there's an important message to send to Russia that they actually use their influence with the Assad regime to stop these appalling atrocities in Aleppo and let humanitarian aid through.
But Russia's already using its influence on the UN Security Council and in Syria firmly on the side of the Assad regime. British doctor David Knott has recently returned from Syria and received these messages in the last 24 hours from a Syrian colleague. The situation breaking down quickly, he says. Regime capturing civilians and sending them to a lodge detained in Jibrin near Aleppo airport. Please help the rest. He also calls for humanitarian corridors. As you know, Doctor, civilians here don't trust in regime and Russia. It's so important for civilians here to have international guarantee that the corridor will be safe. As Aleppo's misery deepens, there have been any number of promises to help from any number of world leaders, but nothing coming close to guaranteeing that its people will be safe. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.